Have you ever noticed when you've been traveling throughout the world, and especially in Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, a little fly etched into the urinals?
Okay, Tim. Weird that you're asking me about urinals and in airport things. But yes, I have noticed that in particular because it's a famous behavioral science experiment.
Yes.
And it's weird because when you look at this fly, it really is just this little life-size replica of a fly painted onto the inside of the urinal, slightly off center in the men's bathroom, right? And what is really cool about this is the impact that tiny little fly has on human behavior, particularly men's peeing behavior.
Well, that
And I
among
have a weird smile on my face, and I don't know why.
I know. And I'm looking at that kind of thinking, all right, well, in addition to that, we're going to cover some other things, but that is at the heart of what we're exploring today. Not the men's urinating, habits, but
It's part of the conversation, but it's not the entirety of the conversation.
It's not. It is not. We are going to talk to our guests, Eva van den Broek and Tim den Heijer, who are both authors of The Housefly Effect, How Nudge Psychology Steers Your Everyday Behavior.
They didn't solve it. I'm from advertising. That's my background. They didn't solve it in an advertising kind of way. We would never have come up as advertising creatives with painting a little fly in the urinal, and then guys would, without even being able to explain why, just aim at it, and the problem just solves itself. So that behavior can be so difficult to change behavior with campaigns or interventions, and then it can be as easy as painting a little fly.
That was the voice of Tim, our guest. And what I love about his and Eva's approach to this topic is how they combine Eva's background as a behavioral economist with Tim's background in advertising. And they wrote about it and talked to us in a way that showed these small environmental cues, how big of an impact they can have, and in surprisingly powerful ways sometimes.
Yeah, right. And we don't just talk with them about the famous fly in the urinal, right?
No.
Thank goodness. But in our conversation, we're going to explore everything from casino design to online shopping to why we keep pushing those damn placebo buttons at the crosswalks.
What are you talking about? Placebo buttons at the crosswalks? No,
they don't work.
They're just slow, Tim, aren't they? Aren't they just slow?
They don't work.
God. All right. But what really caught my attention was their discussion about how knowing about these effects doesn't make us immune to them, which, well, then why are we talking about this? But anyway, no, it doesn't. And even when we know that we're being nudged, the nudges often still work.
Right. And I love how Tim and Eva share ways that they use these effects in their own lives, right? Because Eva talks about using social commitments to help her keep deadlines. And Tim combines his daily walks with a routine through Amsterdam's red light district. I love this, what he and his wife call the temptation bundling with variable rewards tool. It was pretty fantastic.
Okay, I'm not sure if my wife would be in for the red light district there.
Well, lucky for you, you live in Minneapolis and not Amsterdam.
Okay, true. And that the red light district in Minneapolis is somebody that just has a red light on their porch, and it's doesn't mean anything like it does in Amsterdam. So,
no.
Okay, and speaking about personal applications, we also had this fascinating discussion about how online casinos are now required, at least in the Netherlands, to have people set monthly spending limits up front. And this, I think, is a really great example of how we can apply behavioral science to protect people rather than just exploit them.
Yeah. You know what else struck me is their point about how we tend to think about these effects applying more to other people than to ourselves.
Well, yeah, of course. That's how it works. It
I'm
applies more to you than to me.
I'm going to admit that I've fallen victim to this idea from time to time, even though I know we're all susceptible, including me.
Well, then it's a good thing that I'm not. So there you go. At least we have one perfectly sane, rational host on this show who doesn't succumb to all of these, behavioral tricks, right?
Your halo is shining so brightly I can barely see you.
I joke. I know. I also fall prey to them, right? But they also raised, I think both Tim and Eva raised some really fascinating questions about ethics and the use and techniques of behavioral science and these nudges and when are they appropriate, and when might they cross a line, and how these techniques can be used for good and not so good purposes. And there's some really good food for thought in that for our listeners. Yeah.
I think so too. And I just want to say, this is kind of diverging here, but if you like what you're hearing on Behavior Grooves, come out to our Facebook group. We've got a Facebook group called the Grooves Community Page. Drop by, leave us a note, or check out the new videos that we have on our YouTube page.
Right. And our YouTube page was recently redesigned. So if you haven't checked it out, please do. We made it easier to navigate. We put up some of our more popular topics and guests. We have little shorts of Tim and me. Who would not want to see Tim and me in a short little fun episode where you get to see our beautiful faces? And maybe as we're thinking about that.
No one has ever asked for that, ever. No one.
We do have faces for radio or for podcasting and not for, television or video. But yeah. If you can get past that, go out to our YouTube page because there's some really cool stuff out there and it's really fun.
Groovers, we invite you to sit back and relax with a perfectly positioned pour of, did you get the fly in the urinal reference there? Perfectly positioned pour of your favorite beverage.
With the glass that has the fly on the bottom, right?
Yes.
A fake one, not a real one.
A fake one, yes. And enjoy our conversation with Eva van den Broek and Tim den Heijer. Eva van den Broek and Tim van den Heijer, welcome to Behavior Grooves.
Thank you so much.
We are glad to have you here. And after all the rave reviews coming from fellow podcasters, it's really fun to be sitting across the video screen from you. So we're going to start with a speed round and want to know first and foremost, do you prefer, and this is for both of you, Eva, you start, do you prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Tim?
Immediately. My own.
It's a double coffee team. All right.
Okay, good. Nice and straightforward.
Yeah. Is any particular, is it straight black? Do you put cream and sugar in? Is there a way that it is used or?
If you really want to know, I was a black espresso drinker, but now that I've developed this old man's disease called stomach ulcer, I'm at cappuccino right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, I always fall for the hipster hypey stuff. So I like AeroPress filter coffee that you have to put down and you have to wait for 2.6 minutes exactly. And then you have to stir it with chopsticks to get the recipe right. And everybody is sort of disappointed when I serve it to them, but I like it. So yeah.
There's a process. We will. Yeah, that's way too much for me. So there you go. Mm-hmm. All right. Speed round is never a speed run. We don't know why we call it that. But anyway, here's the second question. And Tim, I'm going to start with you. If you could have one superpower, but only for an hour, what would that superpower be?
That's a good one. I would I think the stuff I do in my job, actually get people to do the stuff that I would like them to do. I would like to have a superpower version of that for an hour where it's actually, I'm sure that it will work. Yeah.
Super influence power. I like that. Yeah, that
with
I can
certainty.
Just influence. There you go.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Like the certainty part. Maybe I wouldn't use it. It would just have peace of mind for an hour,
If I wanted to, I could. Yeah. Eva, how about you?
So I'm tempted to say I want to be able to adjust the size of my irises by myself, so consciously. I think that would be super cool.
Oh my gosh! Wow. All right. So we haven't asked this question as much as the coffee tea, but I have never in all of our that's one that I had not even envisioned in my wildest dreams. Yeah,
I read a couple of papers on avatars so people were playing games with avatars, and then apparently they were so much more likely to like the other person on the screen if the temporization of the getting bigger and smaller of the irises was synchronized between the avatar and you yourself.
My gosh.
So I think this is the superpower I want.
But you could just have chosen the superpower to make people like you anyway.
I'm a bit more stupid there. Yes.
That's right.
Oh my
Tim.
gosh. All right.
Okay. Third speed round question. In general, do we use houseflies too little or too much? Eva, what do you think? Too little or too much?
Too little, I'd say. I think they're being used by specific groups of people. Too little and too much. Yeah.
Okay. Tim?
I think the good guys use them too little and the bad guys use them too much. If you can be so simplistic about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about that as we get in. But we have the final of our speed round questions here. Is it true that a fly in the Amsterdam airport is the most famous fly in the world?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
But Eva is a biologist.
Eva has a
you're looking like you're contemplating this.
Yeah, there's this one Greek philosopher that had a fly as a pet. And he apparently, but perhaps this has been fact-checked to death, he apparently paid, I think, an enormous amount for his funeral. So he really buried his pet housefly. And I think maybe that is the most famous one. I'm not sure. No,
all right. I'm just going off of your book and the very, very in the introduction, the most famous fly in the world.
Okay, sorry for that. Yeah.
We are here talking with Eva and Tim today about their new book, The Housefly Effect: How Nudge Psychology Steers Your Everyday Behavior. And just to start, let's talk about the intro of the book with this most famous fly in the world that may not be the most famous fly in the world, at least the one with the least, doesn't have the nice, expensive funeral for it. Can you talk about that and how that kind of influences the way that you've been thinking about this and even the name of the book and how you label these things?
Yes, well, maybe for listeners who aren't aware of the fly in the urinal, Schiphol Airport, very close to where we are right now, had the problem that guys don't aim so well when they're standing at the urinal. Then the floor gets dirty. There's a technical term called splashback for that. And they wanted to solve that because cleaning it costs a lot of money, but it's also very inconvenient for travelers when the toilets are closed down. And what's interesting about it is they didn't solve it. I'm from advertising. That's my background. They didn't solve it in an advertising kind of way, because in advertising we would have come up with maybe like a jokey, funny campaign where a pilot says, I always steer very well and you have to do the same thing. Or maybe it would have been like a purpose-driven ad where they went, at Schiphol, we believe in a great experience for all our travelers, something like that. But we would never have come up as advertising creatives with painting a little fly in the urinal, and then guys would, without even being able to explain why, just aim at it, and the problem just like solves itself. So that behavior can be so difficult to change behavior with campaigns or interventions, and then it can be as easy as painting a little fly. We thought it was a great metaphor for the stuff we wanted to write about. All these little things that have way more influence on our behavior than we think, and that aren't always so easy to explain. Still, I had to do some convincing Eva to name in the Netherlands there are now 5 books and more coming up, to name it all after a urinal, of course.
Yes, I was kind of hesitant to, of course, I'm a behavioral economist, and at international conferences, people would bring up this fly because, yes, it is famous indeed. I was a bit sick of explaining, yes. But then this is Tim's field, right? He knows what makes things, attractive, and if that's urinals, I'm fine.
Plus, we really wanted to name the book the effect, because we know about a little effect called the effect, which means that people are more interested in something once you name it an effect. So we thought of other things, but in the end, Tim was very convincing. Well, we think, to be slightly more serious, if you're trying to convince people of how interesting behavioral science is, you should use the insights from behavioral science in doing that. Because we've both been to a lot of lectures that start out with saying people don't change their behavior because of a lot of information. And then the next hour is a lot of information about that. And we didn't want to fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to apply a lot of the stuff we've learned about chunking, about making, ways to change people's mind, maybe. We wanted to apply those to the book.
Yeah.
So for listeners who might not be clear, is the Housefly Effect a nudge?
That's a tough one, since nudges are hard to catch, like houseflies, like hard to define and hard to pin down. Pinning down actually also works well with flies. Sorry for that. I think it's we use it as a sort of an umbrella thing for all kinds of tiny changes or elements or phenomena in the surroundings or in the environment that have an effect that's larger than you would expect on our behavior.
I think many nudges also are housefly effects, but are also housefly effects that I wouldn't call a nudge. For instance, if you do something really smart in the background of a TV ad, and that can really impact behavior, I wouldn't call it a nudge because it's still an ad. So I would call that a housefly as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would agree with from my take on this. I was actually, I have to admit, I was a little worried when I read the title of the book and everything. I'm going, oh, this is going to be just another book on nudges and different pieces, and haven't we just had enough of those? But then as I read it, I was really pleasantly surprised, because this is. You gave life to all of these ideas. You gave some really great examples. You talked about how it applies to our everyday life. And I thought you just, the way that it was rebranded and the way that you spoke about it. So Tim, your comment earlier about using behavioral science in the book about behavioral science, I think is really key, because I think you actually accomplished that really well. So what was the impetus for writing this book? I mean, why did you guys decide, hey, this is a book that's needed at this time? And how did you think it was different than what was out there already?
So, I guess it started, I was talking and writing for a publisher, a friend of mine, and he was really intrigued by the kinds of things that I was doing for the government, but these were all kind of dull examples, right? There would be tiny effects and they would take a long time to explain to people. And I was like, yeah, but I want to write a book about it because there's so many more policymakers that need to know about this stuff. So many more of the good people, so to say. And he was like, yeah, but your examples are kind of chewy, kind of boring. So then he decided to match me up with this guy. And I was like, no, I'm marketeer. So we are here as an arranged marriage. You can tell how it works after 5 kids.
Well, and I think what got me started to think seriously about writing a book about this is that I already did a lot of lectures about it.
Yeah.
And people would always come up at the end and say, hey, those were great examples. That's really interesting. Where can I read about it? And I would have like this long list of, there's a chapter in that book and there's a nice example in that podcast and stuff like that. And after a while, I started thinking, if people are asking for a book and it's not there, maybe I should think about writing it. But then, of course, coming from advertising, basically, if I would write it by myself, it would be like, hey, I'm from advertising. I got really interested in behavioral science, and this is what I collected,
Yeah.
So it was great to work with Eva, who actually, where I could say, we're constantly WhatsApping each other. I don't know if you use WhatsApp, but basically texting each other, going, hey, I was in the shower and was suddenly thinking about how weird it is that all those showers are designed differently. What's going on there? And we will just be yapping about it for a day, and maybe it becomes a paragraph in a book or whatever. So it's this long conversation about behavior.
Yeah, there's this cool thing. So I studied lots of these more abstract theories about behavior, right? And studying them in the lab and trying them out and all that, and doing theoretical biology. And I would every now and then have theories that I thought were really cute, but then I couldn't come up with nice examples. And I would just tell them to Tim or app them or text them to Tim. And he would be, that's just like what I've just seen with this beer brand. Here we go. So that works wonders, really. Yeah.
Eva, you and I both have this partner named Tim who can bring in some of these really good insights and different pieces. So we share that. There you go. I like that. All right.
Yeah.
I love the way that you talk about each other too, like the acknowledgments in the book when, like, Eva, you talk about how Tim sort of turned you on to this idea that there's something really cool about this. It's not just all boring. And Tim talked about how writing the book can be so rewarding when you have a partner who is really
Yeah.
engaged. I feel like maybe your publisher was a great producer, like a music producer. A great producer can bring in the right talent together to make a record that's better than either of them could make individually. Did you feel like that?
I certainly do. I think he really made a good match. And maybe we should move to another market to bringing people together in other aspects of life. I don't know. Yeah.
There you go.
I agree with that. And I think what's really interesting when you start to write from two different perspectives is you don't have to give your definitive opinion on anything. You're able to say, well, there's this way of looking at it, there's that way of looking at it. And I think in some cases that really helped us to discuss certain subjects in a slightly different way.
And we really play with it as well, right?
Yeah.
Where we make some kind of a caricature out of ourselves in the book. Like me being the angel and he the devil, I guess. Well, no, that's
which is how it is. The Tim is always the devil part of this.
Well,
so
you know
there
how
you
it
go.
is that they're all Lennon and McCartney songs, but some are really McCartney songs, some are really Lennon songs. But then there is also always that one song that you think this has to be a Lennon song, but oh no, hey, it's a McCartney song, And our chapters are like that as well. I think people who know us a little bit can say, oh, that's a Tim paragraph or an Eva paragraph, but they're not always right.
Yeah.
Well, everything about
that.
birds is mine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything
right,
about Las Vegas is mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. One of the things I took out of the book, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I got the suggestion from the book that we are much less rational in our decision making than we often believe. And maybe that's my own bias coming out, and I just putting it on the book. But if you agree with that, could you explain maybe for you guys the most surprising way that our biases influence our everyday decisions from your perspective without us really noticing? Or is there one big piece, or is it just a number of small thousand cuts on how that works?
I think what we're both fascinated by, and also something we quite enjoy in a strange way, is the fact that if you explain all these effects to someone, and even if you say, hey, I'm about to nudge you because I want you to wash your hands and I'm going to use this technique for you and it's called choice substitution, people will be like, yeah, I totally get it, and it will still work. The fact that knowing it doesn't make us less susceptible to it is, to me, the most mind-blowing thing about this.
And mine is, I guess, related. It's the fact that we all seem to think, even the four of us here in this conversation, that these things apply more to others than to ourselves, right?
No.
So what I try to take from the book is that people aren't that, they are responsible for what they do, but many of the things that we do and say and act upon are actually coming from outside. And that gives you a bit of a less, judgmental view on people in general. At least that goes for me.
Yeah.
And
you mean,
as well as I think by writing this book, I'm a bit less mean to myself in that sense.
Oh.
Like now I know why no.
Interesting. Well, I guess just to kind of pick up on that, I thought that all the biases really did apply to other people and not to me. How did I miss that?
There's a short list in the end of people who aren't susceptible to it, and we'll add you to the next edition.
Put me on the next edition. No,
it's like I don't know if that's a famous example internationally, but in the Dutch advertising world, there's this famous quote that was supposedly said in market research, where someone said, "Advertising doesn't work on me because I only buy big name brands."
Yeah. Well, to that end, should we become? Are we better off? Are our lives richer and more fulfilling if we become more aware of these effects on us and these hidden influences?
So this is where the devil in me comes out, right?
Okay.
I seriously have issues with the word being aware. I think that sounds like a, well, I think the world might be a better place if we would all try out and play with these things a bit more. So say with our co-workers or our the Tim in your life, whatever. But just trying what kinds of things influence people to do whatever they do. I think that makes us look at people and situations a bit differently. Being aware of it, I don't think that works.
Okay.
I think, to add to that, there are situations where being aware of it works if that awareness leads to you to not expose yourself to certain contexts.
Right.
Context. I mean, so for instance, if you have this idea that willpower is supreme, if you want to drink less alcohol, you go to a bar and say, "I'll just have the motivation to only drink water there," and you probably won't. If you can accept the fact that your behavior is very much steered by your context and by the situation, you might say, "Let's not meet at a bar. Let's meet at a coffee shop." Not an Amsterdam coffee shop, that would be even worse, but an American coffee shop. So I think in that way, awareness might help. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is Kurt, and we want to say thanks for listening to Behavioral Grooves. And we hope that you're enjoying this episode, but it feels a little bit one-sided. You're hearing from us, but we're not hearing from you.
This is Tim, and we have 2 suggestions to remedy that. The first is join our Facebook page and engage with us.
We want to talk with you. We want to hear your perspectives, and hopefully our Facebook page might be the place to have some of that interaction. So please come and join us.
The other recommendation we have for you is to leave us a quick rating. You know, the little 5-star thing at the bottom of your app? Or a short review. Just leave us a few words about what you like about behavioral groups. We'd very much appreciate it.
Thanks, and we now return you to our regularly scheduled programming. You bring up a really interesting aspect in the book about the ethics of this. And I was going to get into this later, but I think at this point, we're kind of talking about this. Is there a moral boundary for using these types of effects to influence people? And I know, there's differences probably in, who the actor is that is in, using these. Is it a corporation that is out for profit? Is it a governmental institution? Is it your boss at work? Are there boundaries, and how do you guys look at that? And I know Cass Sunstein and Richard Thaler have written a lot about this, but we wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah. So I'm also teaching a lot of policymakers about how to apply these things to their field or job. And they always are very hesitant to put these things to use. They really, they're a bit scared. And there's a couple of examples that I use for them to show how much effect these things have if we just apply them without testing, like without knowing what the effect is. There's a couple of really big, nice examples of defaults or whatever that really got people into trouble. And then they say, whoa, but shouldn't we take that up to, the chiefs of staff or whoever? And of course, you can't do that with all default buttons. So no. So they do understand that there's no such thing as neutral design or so. That is always my first way of finding the heart of the policymaker in these things.
Yeah.
And then the second thing, I think the shortcut that I use for them is how would you explain to your brother or sister that this is the way we are trying to let them do the right thing in the long run? That's the easy version of the Sunstein and Taylor manifesto, I guess, or what's of like trying to make things avoidable and transparent and all that. So that's how I cope with it. But it's yeah.
Yeah, I think in my daily work, the questions I ask are, am I nudging or moving someone to do something I might logically expect them to regret? Mm-hmm. Then I'm not going to take the job. Mm. And the other point that for me personally goes too far is to apply all these effects to really build habits, unless they're very healthy habits. But I think most effects are fair game to get someone to try a drink once, try a holiday destination once. Once you get to apps that where all these algorithms and behavioral insights are being used, and all these experiments to get kids to use their phone for 6 hours a day, that's not a part that I feel comfortable working in. Yeah. Part of the market. Yeah.
Well, along those lines, we think about there are a lot of these effects that have been used for good purposes, right? And forgive me for putting you on the spot here, but does something come to mind? Is there an example that comes to mind where there was a really great use of one of these effects that had a really positive?
Yeah, for
impact?
me, one I love is Hope soap. This is a soap that it was made for African school children. And they had been trying for a very long time to get African school children to wash their hands in school, because there are diseases there that are very dangerous. And if you wash your hands, you don't get the disease and you get to live. It's very important. But a lot of the charities involved had this idea that they had to change this situation by explaining to these kids that bacteria exist, that they make you ill, and that you can wash your hands, etc. And it just wasn't working. For whatever reason, it wasn't. And then somebody said, well, even though we're a charity and we hate McDonald's and big corporations, we're going to think like McDonald's. What would they do? They would offer toys. So they made very simple soaps with a toy inside. And the more you wash your hands, the sooner you get to the little toy. And it saved lives, because they thought, how are we going to get the behavior that we want, instead of having all these moral high horse ideas about how they should get there. And I love that. Yeah.
It's beauty.
Eva?
Yes. Yeah, well, the things that come to my mind right now are actually the ones that have been abused for getting people into, I'm thinking now of say, online casinos and these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're filled with all these houseflies and worse animals. And there's a number of regulations now in the Netherlands that try to sort of downsize that a bit. Like right now, there's legislation that says you have to first, before you enter one of these online casinos, you have to enter how much money you're actually willing to lose over the course of the next month. And that is something that is not very limiting, and it's also not very invasive or so. It just says, hey, think about what is your monthly expenditure and how much would you... Of course, casinos are trying to anchor these things, and there's lots of dirty little thingies you can do to steer it up. But still, the fact that people need to think about it, I think, is a beautiful example of metacognition in a sense. Yeah.
So it wouldn't be bad to do that at Amazon as well, or
not
just
at
to say,
all.
what are you going to spend this month, and give a little,
Can I just follow up on that? Why this month, and why not this session? Or you're walking into the casino, and how much am I willing to spend or lose today? Or
Don't get
how
me
much am I willing
started
to
here.
spend?
Yeah, I love that question. So there's actually in the law, it says, I think you can either ask by day, by week, or by month. And then it's up to the casinos themselves what they ask first, and in what sequence, and in what settings, boundaries, all that. So there's different ways. You also see different examples of how they do it. Yeah. I think month makes most sense, because most people think about income in monthly terms, not in daily allowances.
Yeah. Thank you.
But there's a temporal part of that month is further away at the end of that. And you talk a lot about that in the book, about some of those temporal effects that we have. And just the fact that if I have a due date, that's due this month versus like the 30th of this month versus the 1st of next month, there's going to be a difference in how soon I start on that project and various different things. So is there any aspect of that? If I was a casino, wouldn't I want to push that temporal component out further?
Yeah, you can see them trying, actually, if you look at casinos right now. Yeah. So it could work both ways, right? Because it's the month is stretching out starting from now, of course. So it depends on whether you think forward looking or not. Well, mostly what you see is that some of these casinos, they sort of link the three different limits to each other. So if you say 10 euros a day, it automatically says, okay, that would be then 300 a month.
Okay.
And some don't, of course. So you have to count back yourself. And I think I would love to have data, right? To see what
Yeah.
people fill in. What I would love to have that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
keep going for it. Definitely. I'm curious if we could talk a little bit about sort of the practical applications of using these cognitive shortcuts compared to our autonomy. Like, to what degree are we giving up autonomy when we succumb to these cognitive shortcuts?
I think in general, autonomy is something that we sort of automatically connect to willpower, and willpower is something we tend to overestimate in ourselves and others. So, I think the most, so I think in an ideal world, say, you would want to review every now and then the kind of cognitive or the kind of, what's that? Environmental cues that are in place to help you navigate life, say on your computer. Check them every now and then, see if they lead on long term to the things that you are prioritizing, actually, and then adjust them a bit. And I think there will be technological mechanisms for that pretty soon. But right now, it seems like there's more temptations out there than security nets that we can adjust ourselves. I would love to have more grip on that, actually, in terms of meta-cognitive strategies that you can actually employ on your computer to, I don't know, govern your privacy or whatever.
And of course, the fact that we love to think of ourselves as autonomous creatures has a lot to do with all these little houseflies and why they're so effective, right? It's your choice. If you say, but you're free to choose. If you put it at the end of any sales letter, you'll sell more. Maybe autonomy is just another housefly.
Can I bring in one more example here? Because I love this illusion of control, right? Because that's what we're talking about. You can see that popping off the screens by whatever poker app you're opening up, or roulette or whatever. You see options to condition your strategy actually on what previously has been showing up, or what other players have been doing, what you have been doing. So there's hot hand fallacies all over the place, and you can either jump into that or actually do the other way around and think, no, I'm not the fool that would go for the hot hand fallacy, so I'll actually won't, and I'll feel better about myself because of that. So it's like tapping into all types of whatever K-level strategy that you have in these terms of cognitive
and this is leading to our fascination with placebo buttons, which we love.
So with that, let me go in. So in the book you've kind of put these different effects, kind of group them into 7 chapters, right? Our deceptive brain, power of convenience, pain and how to turn it into gain, conforming, time has wings, the force of attraction, and money and motivation, punishment and penalties, as you go in there. But within there, do you have a few maybe some effects that you really like? And I know, Tim, I don't want to put you on the spot. We already talked about this up front, but you're just bringing up some of these. And so maybe you can just go in on the placebo one, because that is another area that I thought was really fascinating from what you guys were talking about.
Placebo effects are very fascinating to me because I'm not from medicine, but I'm from advertising. And basically most brands tend to function as placebos. Suddenly, people like lager better because it says their favorite brand on it, even though they can't tell the taste in a blind taste test. And we know that with people who are high-end audio freaks, I'm a little bit susceptible to it. I always tell myself I get like the best deal, but still good quality. Anyway, there are actually people who think that when they switch to a different electricity provider, that they can hear it in the in the sound of their audio. They want the old electricity back because that was better electricity that they got there.
Right.
But they can really hear it. And we know that this works with wine from different bottles. We know that this works with, of course, pills against headaches. We know that people get the nocebo effect, where they actually feel all the side effects of something they're not taking. And it's how we create our own reality based on what we're expecting. and like the brain as an expectation machine is very fascinating. And we're here in an office, and it is a little bit cold there, and there's a button right next to us that we may or may not actually be able to use to make it more hot or more cold in here. And it's probably fake, and it was probably put there just to give us a sense of some control over the temperature.
But
we see those
you like it anyway.
Closed door. It doesn't close the door. It just gives you the idea that you have some influence over when the door closes. You cross the street, 25% of those buttons doesn't do anything. It's just to give you some feeling of control over traffic, so you won't run in front of a cab or whatever. And I just love how we keep falling for that.
Eva, do you have an effect or a group of effects that you find really fascinating?
Oof. The favorite kids question.
Yeah, it is. It is the favorite fly question here of all your flies.
So I really like one metaphor that is Tim's, of course. And that is the press officer in your brain, I guess. So it's part of this deception fly that we took as the first one, because it's this illusionary self-perception that we have that gives way to so many of the other flies, right? As soon as you see one of these self-deception flies, the others are out there as well, basically. So I guess that's my favorite. This idea that there's just something in your head that's always explaining your behavior just a couple of milliseconds after you've done something to others, because you've been choosing, I don't know, this or that organic product because you always think they taste better, whatever. So I guess that is the press officer is my favorite cognitive strategy there.
Yeah. Are there any that you use in your own life? Do you use houseflies in your own life? And are there any that are particularly meaningful or reliable for you?
I do a lot of social commitments because I'm not that good with deadlines. I think my Tim here can confer. Yeah. So I promise him to deliver something so that I actually will hand in a chapter in time. And then still I feel a bit, but if I add the publisher on to that promise, then I'm sort of sure it will actually
get
come
done.
into place. Yeah.
I actually use one on almost daily basis that I learned from Eva, which is called temptation bundling.
Oh yes.
About
Katie Milkman.
About a year ago, my wife and I said we really should walk more. We need to move a little bit more. We can't always go to the gym. We're getting a little bit older. Sometimes we have these little injuries, so you can't go there. So it would be great to get in your 10,000, 15,000 steps a day and get out there. But then it can get a little bit boring. So then we made this little route that just goes through a quiet part of town. But the last 10 minutes before we return home is the red light district, the famous red light district in Amsterdam. And there's always craziness going on there, and excitement, and maybe a little bit dangerous stuff that you have to look out for. But it's always like, what is going to be now? It's always weird parties, people dressed up, whatever. And then so that's 5 minutes or 10 minutes of our walk, and the rest is through the quiet part of town. But to have those 10 minutes as the really keeps us walking every day, because that's temptation bundling.
Combined with variable rewards, right?
Yes.
So that you don't know what's coming up. Yeah, great.
Yeah. It's like your own little amusement park ride that you're walking to, right? You get the little 5 minutes within there, and
never thought that we would be using behavioral science to deconstruct the value of the red light district in Amsterdam.
There you go.
Wow.
I seriously hope they won't move it to another side of Amsterdam. That would be very bad for your health.
Yeah, very long walk.
Or very good. Yeah.
How do you want people to use the book? What would be your hope that people take away and actually apply from the Housefly Effect?
So I would love people to start experimenting with it themselves. And that doesn't have to be in large organizations or municipalities. I mean, I'd love that, of course. That's basically the goal of everything I do. But I'd love people to just start playing with how others and they themselves react to these things in order to get this more friendly view on human beings. It sounds so. So that I guess is my answer.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. But also, just as a writer, what I love when I'm reading nonfiction is when I read these little things where I think, oh, I need to remember this because tomorrow I'm going to call my father, for instance, and he will love this,
Yeah.
And I'm also hoping that people will pick up little things that become anecdotes that they tell people and maybe have a nice discussion about or talk about or get a little bit curious about why is that and maybe look a little bit deeper into it. So if people pick up a couple of those from the book, then I'm very happy.
All right, I have to give you guys some real accolades here. We get a lot of books. We get lots of authors that we are interviewing and different things, and I often take them down and I'm reading them over lunch, and I leave them on the table. And I have a 14-year-old child, and they just ignore. Elise picked up your book and was was fascinated by reading through, and I have to mark where they ended up their reading because they're continuing to read it. So Tim, to your point, what you were just saying, this is going to have a conversation that I am going to have with Elise, and we're going to have a fun conversation about some of the different effects that you guys have written about. So applause to you on that. You have intrigued my 14-year-old, which is not an easy thing to do. So
thank you very much.
Cool.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
Yes.
We sometimes ask slightly silly questions, and forgive us if this might sound a little silly, but if you had an anonymous donor give you funding for 100,000 billboards around the world, but all of those billboards would have to have just one message, just the same message on all of them, what would you want that message to be?
We have an advertising guy, and
both of you.
on.
I mean, it's of course it's one thing to see Eva looking; she's the scientist.
Yeah.
But
I just today I got something framed. It was a gift for my boyfriend, and it was a poster that I've been printing myself. So really, like print with ink and all that. Mm-hmm. And it says, it sounds better in Dutch, but it says, "I'm in doubt. You too?" ? And I sort of like that at the moment. But I don't know whether that's the message I would want to bring to the world. But that's the one that pops
up. That's okay.
Well, I don't have a snappy slogan for it, but I would definitely use that to inspire people to read more. I think that reading is so important and makes life so much more interesting. Mm-hmm. And I think with the influence of social media and the bubbles we're all in, to get people just to get a library card and pick up a book and just say, I don't know if I'm going to agree with this, but I'm sort of curious what's in there. I think that would make a very positive change. I know this sounds a little bit boring from the ad guy, but still.
Yeah. Now use RSS feeds. Maybe that's what we should
bring back RSS. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a big fan. That's good. And change the electricity in your house so that you get the maximum audio signal through your amplifier. So let's imagine, if you would, for just a minute. This is this is slightly silly.
Another silly question by Tim. Here we go. So,
but imagine that you were stranded on a desert island for 1 year. Each of you individually, by the way, this is not together. You agree on a lot of things, but you pursued a lot of things individually. So, Eva, you're on an island by yourself, and you get to bring 2 musical artists' catalogs with you. All of the music that a particular artist has created in their lifetime, with all of the iterations.
I should have been prepared, right?
Well, no, you don't have to be prepared. This isn't a go to the grave question. It's just
go to the island question. Yeah.
Yeah. What 2 artists would you take with you on that desert island?
I'm so into Arush Aftab. She's wonderful. I would bring herself because she's so much fun. She has a great sense of humor, really. And her voice is the most beautiful thing I can think of right now.
Wow.
Can she sing?
Okay.
She's based in London. She's, I think, Iranian by descent. And she has this harmonious way of singing again. I don't know. She's wonderful. That's my latest.
Okay. Who would be your number 2? Are you novelty seeking or are you similarity seeking?
Yeah. Similarity seeking in different areas. Britain? No.
Benjamin
Britten, the classical composer? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let me just get in here and explain to you that Eva and I once went karaoke singing in Japan.
Okay.
When we were visiting our publisher there. And she actually sang classical music. This is the only person I've ever heard sing classical at karaoke.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
First of all, I didn't know that you can even sing classical music in a karaoke bar in Japan.
It was displayed. I mean, it was a Japanese bar. I was looking for languages that I could sort of pronounce, and there it was.
Wow. Okay. Tim, how about you? What 2 artists' musical catalogs would you take?
Bowie and Prince. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that was quick. You got that.
That's basically because they're both huge discographies, including stuff that I love and stuff that I still have a little note in the back of my mind. I should listen to that album a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think anything from, if you take Bowie's Eno stuff to Prince's very James Brownie stuff, you would have like lots of great examples of the greatest things in musical history all with you. So I'd bring those 2 and I'd survive for a year.
And again with both of them, you have this very novelty within their own catalog, very different styles of music. Exactly. I mean, early Bowie versus later Bowie, and then every interaction between is just, it's like every album almost sounds like a brand new artist to some degree. And you can, and Tim, I always ask you this, but with like Prince, do you get all of just the songs he wrote that other people covered that he might not have covered? So you can have the Sinead O'Connor,
I wouldn't do that, but I definitely would want The Time. Yeah. Which is basically Prince with Morris Day singing over it for a couple of those albums. Maybe The Family, Madhouse, all those side projects from the 80s where he just put his extra stuff on. I would bring those. Yeah, those are part of that discography. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll bet if we had Jimmy Jam or Terry Lewis, they would say they were not just a side project. That they would want to argue that
if they had wanted to stay in the time, they should have been back on time after recording that. What was it, Janet Jackson song? Yeah.
Tim, you know your stuff about Prince and The Time. Oh, this is fantastic. I love it. Okay. But we could spend another hour just on Prince, actually. But we just want to end by saying a very hearty thank you to both of you. Tim and Eva, thank you so much for being guests on Behavioral Grooves.
Oh, thank you so much for having us. Yeah, it was great fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion with Eva and Tim, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our fly-addled brains.
I wasn't thinking of the addled part. I wasn't expecting that. That caught me off guard. Okay.
Well, there you go. It caught me off guard too. I didn't really know. It's,
Well,
a fly though, Tim, a little painted fly changes how we pee. It does. It's crazy.
At least most of us, right?
Yeah. And what amazes me, Tim, is that I go to the Timberwolves, I go to other places around the US, and there's not more flies in the urinal.
What the hell? Like, if it works, why not just incorporate it everywhere?
The companies that make those little, I'm sorry for all the listeners out here, we're talking urinals. They make the little splash guards, right? And the little, scenty things. why don't you just put like a target on there? Why don't you just
Right.
make a game out of it for men? You're going to increase the likelihood that you'll get less
Yes.
splatter, and
Yes.
you'll save lots of cleaning people's times and the materials. And if you did that, it would make a better world. That is, one of those little small changes that can influence the entire world if it was just implemented.
Which this is Eva's fantastic comment about the housefly effect overall, where she said that it's about having a small thing that has a larger effect than you would expect.
Yeah.
Right. That the fly itself is really a small thing, but it has this outsized effect. And I think that that's really cool to think about things like that. Crosswalks, lights at crosswalks have had an outsized effect on keeping people alive. So
Right.
that's a good thing. We
And
should do more of that.
we should. And so I just have to do, and we talked about this before we got on air here, is this, I was worried about this book. I thought before I started reading it, right? I thought, do we need another book that's going to just talk about the different behavioral biases that we have in different pieces? And I have to say that I was surprised and just delighted by this book. And I say that truly 100% honesty.
Mm-hmm.
The way that Tim and Eva wrote about this was it brought some new research into it. It took it from a different perspective. I think Tim's advertising side of things really adds a level that we haven't seen in maybe some of the other books. And it was just a delight to read. It was fun. It was insightful. It gave me things that I can implement in my everyday life that I'm like going, all right, I know that I'm just knowing this isn't going to do it, but I can do some things and they help you in doing that. And I just absolutely loved it. So
I couldn't agree more. It's my go-to recommended learn about behavioral science book right now.
yeah. Since the old, books that we have are now by an author who is under a little scrutiny of
and they're 15 years old too, so it's nice to have a fresh perspective on the general behavioral science story. So I think that's really good. This one of the things that this reminded me of is and we've had this conversation before about George Lowenstein and Nick Chater's work on I-frame versus S-frame.
Yes.
This idea of the individual intervention versus the systematic level interventions. And the housefly effect certainly emphasizes the individual side of, just using the urinal. A man can go into the urinal and still not point at the fly and make a big mess, right? I mean, it's still up to them. But I do feel like if this was aggregated, this was just part of all the manufacturing of all the urinals around the whole damn world. It could make the place a little nicer, a little cleaner. Like the whole world could just be a little bit better just by having flies, imprinted, or anything, bullseyes, as you mentioned.
Right. And so we just had a conversation with Faisal Naru, right? Yeah. And it was very interesting in that conversation because we talked a little bit about this as well. These the system-wide changes that we can do versus the individual changes that come into this. And I think there is a component of this also that we can't think about these housefly effects or these nudges, as however you want to call them, as silver bullets, right? They are not the. w- They change behavior in an outsized way, but they're still independent, small changes. But if we implement them, as you said, we can create some larger than life effect on this. And the more that we put them in, it's what we talked about. Like it's an incremental change. It might be a less than a 1% change in our overall well-being, but we add a number of these together, and that can make a big impact.
This gets me to the ethical discussions that go along with this of the good and not so good applications of any kind of behavioral science intervention. And I might be rationalizing, or it might be Pollyannish. I'm not exactly sure, but I like the idea that if we have evidence that a particular intervention could help some portion of the population to have a better life. I think about self-enrollment in savings plans, or messages to help people save a portion of their tax fund, or even just a fly in a urinal, just to make it a little easier on the people who are cleaning up. Like, what's the harm in doing that if our general experience is good? Now, just to say that, John, we had a great conversation with John Bashirs about a year ago, talking about there are some downsides to some people saving so much of their income that they do a poor job of keeping up with their debts.
Yeah.
And so there are experiences where there are downsides to this. But I'm hoping that through behavioral science interventions, we can get better at not weeding those people out, but identifying them and treating them differently, giving them better options, helping them make better decisions about their life in general.
Which is the promise of behavioral science, I think. And at the end of the day, understanding how we behave as humans and some of the underlying drivers of that behavior, and being able to tap into those, is a benefit across society. It is this piece where we can make an impact through small changes. And I know you've done work in this, haven't you? I mean,
well, yeah, like I did some work with a nonprofit that I just found so interesting. This is a group that worked with, they provided a bunch of free resources to families of teenage runaways.
okay.
And at the point in time that the family finally usually calls, or at some point they call the authorities and a police officer comes to their house, then they had a sheet that was handed to the family that says, here's a bunch of free resources available to you. And just by changing the formatting and just by rearranging the words and making it easier to read, they had a tremendous uptake and increase in the access to those free services. And is this a housefly effect? Is it a nudge? It certainly is behavioral science, right? Is by just using that behavioral lens to say, how do we process information, making it easier for people to take advantage of something in times of crisis, just felt like it was such a good thing to do.
It's basically just design, Tim, right? Isn't it just communication,
I guess
graphic
to some
design?
degree it is, but it's with a behavioral lens. And
Then
I
think the important piece is you can design something to look pretty or be more readable and different things, but if you don't have that behavioral background, you're not bringing some of that behavioral insight into how you're doing that redesign. It may or may not work. And what you're doing with the behavioral science elements is you're increasing the likelihood that is going to drive the behavior that you're looking for. Going on to more in regards to this ethics part of this, right? There's an element of transparency that I think needs to be happening, because if things are unseen, right, and they have outsized effects, then we do owe it to a certain degree to be a little bit more transparent about that, in my opinion. But again, it comes down to how transparent do we have to be, and do we have to like put a sign above the urinal saying, hey, there is a painted fly on the urinal, and it is to get you to pee more, directly into the urinal to reduce the splash amount outside here? No, I mean, come on.
I love the image of it, though. I'm just imagining
we are
sign.
transparent about why we have a fly. No, I mean, and I think there just needs to be some common sense in this. But do you have to like make a note? We've redesigned this page to make it easier so you're more likely to use the free resources. No, we don't have to do that. But
that's a good call out. Something else that I loved about the book was that these are two people from very different backgrounds that had a lot to say individually. And Eva as an academic, but Tim's musical stuff was really, really fun for me. I mean, the fact that he's really a musician, a real musician, he actually composes and creates and puts it out there. I just love when I get to experience people in the real world who have very strong artistic abilities, and not just abilities, but they're doing something with it. Henry G is, of
Yeah.
course, another example of this, right? I mean, Henry's a fantastic paleontologist, author, researcher, and a crazily productive musician at the same time. So,
Well, so all right. So you like their musical differences and different things, but they also had different perceptions on things and different lenses, which is why I think the book really works. But for instance, we just asked him about favorite cognitive effects and how they used it, right?
yeah,
And Eva brought in the press officer of the brain, this idea that we can rationalize our
right,
behaviors after the fact. And that is so true. I see me doing it all
right.
the time. And then Tim brought in this temptation bundling of going through the red light district and various different pieces.
I
And
know.
they're like two very different approaches, but I
Yeah,
think it brings to at least, for me, it was like, yeah, all of us have a different preference around how we use things and what's going to work for us, which I think is
yeah,
context matters, but our personality and who we are and where we are in our life journey and how we can use behavioral science is also very important to understand. And it just highlighted that fact for me that there isn't a silver bullet, as we talked about before. There's not even a 5-step process to this that if you follow this, it's going to be
right,
better. But it's exploring
right,
and
right.
understanding and taking this and applying it to your own life and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Anything else we need to cover in brewing at this minute, Kurt?
I think that unless you want to go deeper into music, no, I think we've got that. But let's acknowledge that we love this idea of an academic and a business person partnering up together. Not that I'm an academic, but
Well,
I do have. I did the schooling part of this.
you got the PhD, man. So that's all credit to you on that. And I guess maybe there was that nice sort of lineup and symmetry uh,
Yeah,
between Tim and Eva. That um, maybe lastly, maybe not lastly, but I want to remind groovers about our Facebook Groove community. So go on Facebook, go over to the Groove community, check it out, join in the fun. Let's
yeah.
engage, right? We want to hear from you. We want to hear from people like, how do you find your groove? Like
Yeah.
we just want to talk
What
to people who are listeners.
what housefly effect is important for you, right? And again,
Yeah.
go out if hopefully you're on Facebook, maybe not, maybe you're a younger, cooler, hipper person, but maybe you just want to go join Facebook just for this group, right? And you can be part of the cool hip part of Facebook.
And this
So
could be the only Facebook group that you join
yeah,
ever.
yeah,
Yes. Because
yeah.
it's all you'll
So
ever need.
go to groups on Facebook, click join, or search for behavioral groups community, and then join in and follow. And we'll.
Yeah.
There's
It's
some
good.
fun stuff out there. We do some polls, we do some questions, but it's more about the conversations that we can have, and let's
Yeah.
get that conversation going. So, and lastly, we want to thank you for those who support us. We really appreciate it. Whether that is supporting us through Patreon, whether it is supporting us through just giving us nice reviews on whatever podcast service that you're listening to us on.
Yep.
Thank you, thank you,
Yep.
thank you. We really do appreciate that. And we do hope that you enjoy this. And we hope that our conversation with Tim and Eva today will help you this week as you go out and try to find your group.